settle into the sleepy mine channel. Hidden in the northeastern corner of the Netherlands is a village that seems to belong to another age, a place where the gentle movement of water has replaced the familiar rhythm of traffic for hundreds of years. Its name is Giethoorn, and although millions of people have seen photographs of its flower-covered cottages and graceful wooden bridges, many have never heard its story. There are no roads through the historic heart of the village, no busy intersections, and no long rows of parked cars outside the homes. Instead, narrow canals wind between gardens, boats rest beside small wooden docks, and more than 170 bridges connect one side of the village to the other. It feels as though someone imagined the perfect, peaceful village and then brought it to life. Yet Giethoorn is real, and the remarkable story of how it came to exist is every bit as fascinating as the village itself. At first, it can be difficult to understand how an entire community could function without roads. How do neighbors visit one another? How are groceries delivered? How do children travel from one end of the village to the other? For centuries, the answer has been surprisingly simple. They use the canals. Long before electric cars or bicycles became part of everyday life, boats were already carrying families, friends, building materials, and supplies through this remarkable Dutch village. Even today, the waterways remain the heart of Giethoorn, and the peaceful atmosphere they create has earned the village a reputation as one of the most beautiful and relaxing places in all of Europe. During this journey, we will discover how an ordinary stretch of marshland slowly became one of the world's most photographed villages, why water replaced streets, and how generations of people learned to live in harmony with the landscape around them. If you enjoy videos like these, feel free to like and subscribe. More videos are posted weekly. For all night listening, be sure to check out our playlists featuring many relaxing topics. The story begins nearly 800 years ago, during the year 1230. At that time, the landscape looked nothing like the picture postcard destination that visitors know today. Instead, this part of the Netherlands was a vast marshland filled with reeds, soft peat bogs, shallow pools of water, and wet ground that could be difficult to cross on foot. Yet early settlers saw something different. Buried below the wetlands were thick deposits of peat, a natural material formed over thousands of years from layers of plants compressed beneath water. Long before modern heating systems, peat was one of the most valuable sources of fuel available across much of northern Europe. Once cut into blocks and dried, it provided warmth for homes during long winters and became an important resource for families trying to build stable lives. The settlers did not arrive with plans to create canals. Their goal was far more practical. They wanted to harvest the valuable peat beneath their feet. Day after day, season after season, they removed the dark layers from the marshland. At first, the changes to the landscape must have seemed insignificant. A narrow trench appeared where peat had been removed. Nearby, another shallow excavation filled with water. Then another followed, and another after that. No one could have guessed that these simple acts of everyday work would transform the entire landscape. Nature stepped in to finish what people had unknowingly begun. Rainwater collected inside the excavated areas. Underground water seeped into the newly opened spaces. Small channels widened, connected with one another, and eventually became ponds and narrow waterways. Over many years, the marshland evolved into a network of canals, unlike anything the early settlers could have imagined. It was not the result of one grand design or a drawn map. Instead, it emerged through countless ordinary days of hard work and the patient influence of water. That is much how Giethoorn developed. The people harvesting peat were solving the practical needs of their own time. They were not trying to create one of Europe's most famous villages, yet their daily efforts laid the foundation for something extraordinary that would outlive them by many centuries. As more waterways appeared, the settlers adjusted to the changing landscape. Rather than fighting against the water, they learned to live alongside it. Boats became the simplest and most reliable way to travel between homes, transport supplies, and move through areas where wagons would have struggled. Little by little, water stopped being an obstacle and became the village's main pathway. It connected neighbors instead of separating them, and over time the canals became as familiar to the people of Giethoorn as streets are to most communities today. Homes appeared beside the waterways, each positioned to make the most of this unique landscape. Gardens stretched towards the canal edges, and small wooden docks allowed families to tie up their boats just outside their front doors. The transformation feels so complete that the canals appear as though they have always belonged there, reflecting the cottages, trees, and flowers that now surround them. As the village continued growing, another feature became just as important as the canals themselves. Wooden footbridges began connecting one small piece of land to another. Built by hand and shaped with graceful arches, they allowed neighbors to cross the waterways with ease while leaving enough space beneath for boats to pass. Today, there are more than 170 of these charming bridges scattered throughout Giethoorn. Some lead to individual homes, while others connect gardens, pathways, and corners of the village. Together, they create one of the most recognizable landscapes in the Netherlands, adding beauty as well as practicality to everyday life. Giethoorn is often compared with Venice. Both places invite people to travel by water instead of relying entirely on roads. Yet Giethoorn possesses a personality all its own. It feels smaller, more intimate, and closely connected to the surrounding countryside. Instead of grand stone palaces, there are welcoming cottages with thatched roofs. The atmosphere encourages people to slow down without realizing it. That character remains protected even today. Modern visitors often explore the canals aboard electric boats, known as whisper boats. Their name captures the experience. As they pass beneath flower-covered bridges and alongside gardens filled with color, the loudest sounds are often birds singing, water brushing against the boats, and conversations drifting through the fresh air. It is a continuation of a tradition that has always respected the tranquility of the village, allowing Giethoorn to remain much as it has for generations, a place where water, nature, and everyday life continue to exist in harmony. The marshes surrounding Giethoorn did more than influence where the village was built. They shaped nearly every part of daily life. Today, the village lies within the Dutch province of Overijssel, in the eastern part of the Netherlands, a region known for its wetlands, shallow lakes, winding waterways, and broad stretches of green countryside. Looking at a modern map, why water has always been such an important companion here. It is a landscape that encourages people to work with nature instead of against it. And nowhere is that relationship more visible than in Giethoorn. Many imagine the Netherlands as one continuous city connected by busy roads and famous canals. Instead, the journey toward Giethoorn leaves larger towns behind and enters a quieter world filled with meadows, grazing cattle, reed beds, and sparkling water. The pace begins to slow long before the village itself comes into view. Although Giethoorn has become famous because of its canals, the village owes its existence to the wetlands that surround it. Long before homes, gardens, and bridges appeared, this entire region consisted of soft marshland that had been shaped over thousands of years. Water collected in shallow depressions, reeds flourished in the damp soil, and countless plants grew, died, and settled beneath the surface. Layer upon layer accumulated over countless generations until thick deposits of peat formed beneath the marshes. Peat may not seem yet for the people living centuries ago, it represented something extremely valuable. Before electricity, natural gas, or modern heating systems, finding reliable fuel could determine whether a family remained warm through the winter. Forests provided firewood, but trees required many years to mature and were not always plentiful. Peat offered another dependable source of fuel. Once cut into blocks and dried, it burned steadily and produced welcome warmth during the cold months. It would become part of everyday life. That was much the experience of the early settlers. The marshland was not empty countryside waiting to be crossed. It provided something essential for survival, and that practical value encouraged families to remain in the region despite the challenges of living among wetlands. The work itself demanded patience and determination. Peat could not be scooped from the ground. Workers cut into the soft earth, lifting heavy blocks that still held much moisture. These blocks were then arranged to dry before they could be used as fuel. It was physical work performed in damp conditions, often surrounded by water, mud, and thick vegetation. Yet year after year, the effort continued because the reward justified the labor. With every season of harvesting, the landscape changed a little more. Areas where peat had been removed filled with water. Individual excavations joined together until channels began stretching across the marshes. What started as practical digging altered the geography itself. At first, the drawing reveals nothing, yet as each new line is added, an image appears that was impossible to recognize in the beginning. The people harvesting peat never intended to create one of Europe's most villages, yet each season of work added another line to a picture that would only become clear centuries later. As more water appeared, daily routines adapted. Walking remained possible along certain stretches of higher ground, but boats became increasingly practical for carrying heavy loads. A boat could transport peat, building materials, food, and supplies far more easily than a wagon struggling across wet ground. Water was no longer part of the scenery. It became the easiest route from one place to another. This ability to adapt has long been one of the defining characteristics of the Dutch people. Living in a country where much of the land lies close to sea level has encouraged generations to observe the landscape instead of trying to ignore it. Instead of forcing the marshes to disappear, the people around Giethoorn learned how to make the waterways part of everyday life. The canals became neighbors, then obstacles. Even today, that relationship remains visible everywhere. Looking across the village, it is difficult to separate the homes from the water beside them. Gardens lean toward the canal edges, small docks reach into the water, and reflections seem to double the beauty of every cottage. The real sense of calm comes from balance. Water, gardens, trees, and homes all seem to exist in comfortable harmony. The wetlands that once challenged the earlier settlers eventually became the reason people travel from around the world to experience this village. Across nearly 8 centuries, the greatest gift the marshes ever offered was not the valuable peat hidden beneath the ground. Their greatest gift was the landscape they became. Through the patient work of both nature and people, the wetlands were transformed into a place unlike any other in the world. As the years passed, the work of harvesting peat continued across the wetlands surrounding Giethoorn. Each season brought familiar routines as workers removed another section of the soft ground beneath their feet. Although no one could see the finished picture yet, the landscape was changing a little more with every passing year. The narrow cuts left behind by the peat diggers widened as water filled the empty spaces, and individual channels began connecting with one another. What had once been scattered excavations became an expanding network of waterways, reshaping the marshland into something entirely new. This transformation happened so that those living through it may hardly have noticed the full extent of the change. From one morning to the next, it appears unchanged. Only after many years do you realize how tall it has become. The waterways around Giethoorn developed in much the same way. Each day's work seemed ordinary, yet together those ordinary days created one of the most distinctive landscapes in Europe. As more water appeared, families searched for places where they could build their homes safely above the surrounding marsh. Small islands of solid ground became valuable. These patches of higher land offered enough stability for cottages, gardens, and small barns, while still allowing easy access to the growing network of canals. Rather than spreading across wide open fields, as many villages did, Giethoorn developed as a collection of homes resting on individual pieces of land surrounded by water. Looking at the village today, those early decisions are still easy to recognize. Trees provide shade, colorful flowers brighten the canal banks, and boats wait patiently beside wooden docks. Although modern visitors often admire the beauty of these surroundings, the original settlers were making practical choices. They built where the ground offered the greatest security, while remaining connected to the waterways that had become such an important part of everyday life. Living on separate islands presented a new challenge. Families still needed to visit neighbors, share supplies, and help one another during difficult times. Children wished to play together, farmers needed access to nearby land, and local tradespeople traveled regularly between homes. Water connected the community, yet there also needed to be an easy way to cross it on foot. The answer was simple, elegant, and enduring. Wooden footbridges began appearing throughout the growing village. The earliest bridges were probably quite modest compared with those visitors admire today. Built from locally available timber, they were designed first for usefulness than for appearance. They allowed people to step comfortably from one piece of land to another without needing to launch a boat for every short journey. Over time, as more homes appeared and further canals were formed, more bridges followed. Little by little, they became an essential part of village life. Unlike a large highway bridge built to carry heavy traffic, a small wooden bridge invites people to slow down. It encourages conversation, offers a pleasant view across the water, and creates a natural meeting place where neighbors might pause for a few moments before continuing on their way. The bridges of Giethoorn have served that purpose for centuries, connecting not only pieces of land, but also the people who call the village home. As the community expanded, boats steadily became more useful than wagons. On dry land, a wagon pulled by horses could carry heavy loads across fields or village streets. In Giethoorn, however, the canals often provided a far easier route. A boat floated effortlessly across the water, carrying peat, timber, food, household goods, and farming supplies directly to the homes that needed them. Instead of struggling through soft, marshy ground, families loaded their cargo onto a boat and allowed the waterways to guide them. Rather than opening a garage door each morning, you untie a small boat waiting beside the garden. For the people of Giethoorn, this was not an unusual adventure. It was the most practical way to move through their community. Children grew up becoming just as comfortable around boats as children elsewhere became around bicycles. These skills became part of ordinary family life, passed from one generation to the next. Just as parents teach children how to cross a street safely, families in Giethoorn taught young people how to move confidently through the canals that surrounded their homes. Over the centuries, this way of living shaped the character of the village itself. Because boats moved more than wagons and later automobiles, daily life followed a calmer rhythm. Deliveries arrived without clouds of dust. Journeys unfolded at an unhurried pace. Conversations often continued as neighbors drifted alongside one another through the waterways. The canals did more than provide transportation. They influenced the atmosphere of the entire community. Even when the village welcomes guests from around the world, the waterways seem to encourage everyone to slow down. Boats glide beneath graceful wooden bridges, ripples spread across the surface of the water, and reflections shimmer beneath gardens that have been lovingly cared for through many generations. It is difficult to imagine that all of this began with something as practical as harvesting peat from a marsh. Every new canal invited another bridge, every bridge strengthened the growing community, and every boat helped shape a village unlike any other. The people who first settled here could never have predicted that their practical decisions would eventually create one of the most admired landscapes in the Netherlands. Yet by responding to the world around them, instead of resisting it, they built a place where land and water continue to exist in harmony. Traditional homes soon became another defining feature of Giethoorn, and even today they remain among the first things visitors notice as they drift along the canals. Their appearance feels timeless. Looking at these homes now, it is easy to admire their beauty, but every part of their design originally served a practical purpose. The people who built them were not trying to create picture-perfect scenery for future travelers. They were building comfortable homes using the natural materials that surrounded them. One material proved valuable throughout the wetlands. Thick stands of reeds grew abundantly in the nearby marshes, rising tall above the shallow water and swaying with every passing breeze. To many people, they might have appeared to be little more than ordinary plants, yet for generations of local families, they represented an important building resource. The reeds could be harvested, bundled together, and arranged to form durable roofs capable of protecting a home through changing weather. What nature provided freely became one of the most recognizable features of the village. Harvesting reeds was work that required experience as well as patience. Not every reed was suitable for roofing, and timing mattered. Families learned which plants were strongest, when they should be gathered, and how they needed to dry before becoming useful. Much like selecting quality timber for a fine piece of furniture, choosing the right reeds at the beginning made a great difference to how well the finished roof would perform many years later. Knowledge like this was passed from one generation to the next until it became part of everyday village life. Every part of the building feels connected to the place where it stands. That was much the case in Giethoorn. The cottages belonged to the landscape because the landscape itself had helped create them. Once the reeds were prepared, skilled craftsmen layered them one bundle at a time across the roof. The work demanded careful attention because every layer needed to overlap the one beneath it. If arranged properly, rainwater would flow down the roof instead of finding its way inside. Each new layer strengthened the one below until the roof became surprisingly thick. From a distance, the finished result appeared soft and gentle, yet it formed a durable covering capable of withstanding years of changing weather. Many first-time visitors are surprised by just how substantial these roofs actually are. From photographs, they often appear delicate, like neatly arranged straw. Standing nearby tells a different story. The thatch forms a deep protective layer that insulates the cottage beneath. During colder months, it helps retain warmth inside the home, while in the warmer months, it slows the movement of heat from the summer sun. Long before modern insulation materials became available, the people of Giethoorn had already discovered an effective solution using resources growing around them. Nature has a way of providing simple answers to practical problems. Birds gather twigs, grasses, and feathers to build nests suited to their surroundings. Beavers use branches and mud to create sturdy lodges within rivers and ponds. In much the same way, the people of Giethoorn learned to build homes that reflected the landscape rather than competing against it. Their cottages became another example of living alongside nature instead of trying to reshape it. With proper care, a well-built thatched roof could serve a family for many decades. No roof lasts forever, and regular maintenance remained an important responsibility. Small repairs prevented larger problems from developing, and worn sections could be replaced before weather caused more serious damage. This ongoing care reflected the same patient outlook already seen throughout the village. Just as the canals required attention and the boats needed regular upkeep, the cottages also benefited from steady care than hurried repairs. The homes themselves developed a style that has become closely associated with Giethoorn. Bright white walls reflected sunlight, creating a pleasing contrast with the dark roofs above. During spring and summer, gardens filled with flowers added even more color to the scene. Shades of green surrounded nearly every cottage as shrubs, climbing plants, and tended lawns blended into the landscape. Painters and photographers are drawn to these views. Every season offers a slightly different picture. Fresh blossoms brighten the gardens during spring. Rich green foliage surrounds the cottages through summer. Autumn introduces warm shades of gold and amber, while winter occasionally dusts the roofs with snow, creating scenes that appear untouched by time. Yet beneath these changing colors, the familiar combination of white cottages, reed roofs, and canals remains constant. As more families settled in the village, this style of building spread from one property to another. Although every home reflected the personality of the people living there, together They created a sense of harmony that continues to define Giethoorn today. No single cottage tries to stand apart from the rest. Instead, each contributes to the character of the whole village, much like individual instruments combining to create a piece of music. Visitors sometimes wonder whether the appearance of Giethoorn was planned from the beginning. The village grew through practical choices made over many generations. Reeds were plentiful, so they became roofing. White walls reflected light and gave cottages a welcoming appearance. Gardens flourished in the moist climate, adding color effortlessly. Over hundreds of years, these practical decisions blended together until they created one of the most recognizable village landscapes anywhere in Europe. Looking across the canals today, the cottages are more than attractive buildings. They tell the story of people who understood their surroundings, respected the natural resources available to them, and created homes designed to serve generations for generations. Every reed roof, every white wall, and every tended garden reflects that partnership between people and the landscape. A partnership that continues to give Giethoorn its unmistakable charm nearly 8 centuries after the first settlers arrived. By the time the cottages of Giethoorn had become established along the canals, another feature began shaping the character of the village. While the waterways provided transportation and the homes offered shelter, the gardens added warmth, color, and a sense of welcome that still captures the attention of visitors today. Nearly every cottage seems to embrace the water with tended flowers and shrubs, creating the impression that nature and daily life have grown together over many generations. The climate of the Netherlands helps making these gardens flourish. Rainfall, moderate temperatures, and rich soil provide excellent growing conditions for many flowering plants. Unlike regions that experience long periods of intense heat or severe drought, Giethoorn enjoys a climate where gardens can remain lush and vibrant for much of the year. This natural advantage has encouraged generations of residents to surround their homes with flowers that brighten both the village and the waterways flowing beside them. Among the most admired flowers are the hydrangeas, whose large clusters of blossoms often appear in soft shades of blue, pink, white, and violet. During the warmer months, they seem to spill over garden paths and canal banks, adding generous splashes of color beside the white cottages and dark thatched roofs. Their broad leaves and rounded blooms create an inviting softness that matches the atmosphere of the village. Hydrangeas seem particularly suited to Giethoorn because they enjoy the moist conditions created by the nearby canals and wetlands. While many plants struggle when surrounded by so much water, these flowering shrubs thrive in the Dutch climate. It is another example of how the village has always worked in harmony with its surroundings, instead of trying to force nature into unfamiliar patterns. The flowers appear as though they have chosen this setting for themselves. Spring introduces another familiar sight throughout the Netherlands. Although tulip fields located elsewhere in the country have become famous around the world, tulips also bring welcome color to the gardens of Giethoorn. Their neat rows of blossoms announce the arrival of warmer days after the stillness of winter. Reds, yellows, pinks, purples, and creamy whites brighten the village, creating cheerful displays that seem even more vivid when mirrored in the still canals. They remind us that every season carries its own beauty. In Giethoorn, tulips help mark that transition, joining birdsong and fresh green leaves in welcoming another year of life beside the waterways. Roses also find a comfortable home throughout the village. Climbing varieties often wind gracefully around fences, cottage walls, and garden arches, while tended rose bushes fill the air with fragrance during the warmer months. Their blooms soften the edges of pathways and add another layer of color to the landscape. Together with hydrangeas and tulips, they create gardens that change continually as different flowers take their turn throughout the growing season. Visitors traveling by boat do not observe rows of houses. Instead, they pass living landscapes where flowers, shrubs, and small trees blend into the surrounding waterways. Every bend in the canal reveals another tended garden, another welcoming cottage, and another corner where nature and architecture seem balanced. Just beyond many of these gardens lies another feature that quickly catches the attention of first-time visitors. Extending into the water are small wooden docks built beside individual homes. At first, they may appear no different from the docks found beside lakes elsewhere in the world. Yet in Giethoorn, they serve a purpose that feels surprisingly familiar. They function much like driveways. Instead of parking a family car beside the house, many residents tie their boats securely to these private docks. The sight is both charming and practical. A boat waiting outside the front garden becomes as ordinary here as a parked automobile is in most neighborhoods. Residents step aboard to visit neighbors, carry supplies, or enjoy the waterways that have shaped village life for centuries. Looking across the canals, boats rest patiently beside cottages beneath flowering gardens, ready for the next journey through the village. Nothing appears crowded or hurried. The boats wait with the same calm confidence that has characterized life here for generations. Instead of rows of parked vehicles, graceful wooden boats would rest beneath flowering trees, rising and falling with the movement of the water. Conversations might drift across the canals instead of along busy streets, and neighbors could arrive at your door with the soft sound of water against a wooden hull than the closing of a car door. It is an unusual picture for many people to imagine, yet in Giethoorn, it has remained an ordinary part of daily life for hundreds of years. These private docks also strengthen the close relationship between each home and the surrounding waterways. The canals are not attractive scenery admired from a distance. They remain active parts of everyday living. Today, the gardens and docks together tell an important part of the village's story. The flowers reveal the care and pride residents continue to invest in their homes, while the boats remind visitors that water has always been the village's most dependable pathway. Together, they create scenes that feel both and practical, reflecting a community that has learned to celebrate the unique landscape surrounding it, rather than wishing it was something different. The canals themselves are often the first thing visitors remember long after leaving Giethoorn. While the cottages, gardens, and bridges certainly create a setting, it is the water flowing through the village that gives the entire community its unmistakable character. Unlike busy rivers carrying heavy commercial traffic or canals lined with crowded city streets, the waterways of Giethoorn seem unhurried. They curve through the village, reflecting cottages, trees, flowers, and passing boats with clarity. Water has the ability to change the atmosphere of a place. A pond in the middle of a forest often encourages people to lower their voices without even thinking about it. The canals of Giethoorn have much the same effect. They do not carry boats from one place to another. They create an environment where everyday life unfolds with a gentleness that feels increasingly uncommon in the modern world. Because the canals remain so calm, reflections become one of the village's most natural displays. Wooden bridges arch gracefully overhead, while their curved shapes appear again beneath the surface, creating perfect circles of light and shadow. Even a passing boat creates only ripples that spread outward, before allowing the reflections to settle once again. Photographers often visit Giethoorn, hoping to capture these scenes, yet many quickly discover that no single photograph can fully recreate the feeling of standing beside the water. The reflections are constantly changing with the movement of clouds, the angle of the sunlight, and the smallest breeze passing across the canals. Every moment offers a slightly different picture, making the village feel alive without ever becoming hurried. They paddle comfortably along the canal edges, occasionally gathering beneath bridges or gliding through the reflections of nearby cottages. Some drift through the gardens, while others pause along the grassy banks before returning to the water. Their relaxed behavior adds to the feeling that people and wildlife have comfortably shared this landscape for generations. Swans also make regular appearances throughout the village, bringing an added sense of elegance to the waterways. Their bright white feathers stand out against the darker water during the early morning or late afternoon when the sunlight softens across the canals. Watching a swan move through still water is hypnotic. The bridge may have stood there for many years. The canal has followed the same course for generations, and the swan seems to belong just as the water itself. Moments like these remind visitors that some of the village's greatest beauty comes not from grand landmarks, but from ordinary scenes repeated day after day. Another familiar resident of the canals is the moorhen. Although smaller and less well known than ducks or swans, these lively birds are suited to the wetlands surrounding Giethoorn. They paddle confidently through the quieter edges of the waterways, weaving among reeds and water plants while searching for food. Spend enough time watching the water, and another impressive bird may appear. Herons are frequent visitors to the wetlands, and their patient approach to hunting seems suited to the unhurried rhythm of Giethoorn. Standing still in the shallows, they wait with concentration before making a swift movement toward a passing fish. A heron stands silently among the reeds, its reflection stretching across the still water. Nearby, a pair of ducks drifts beneath a wooden bridge, while a swan glides past a flower-lined garden. Instead, every part of the scene seems content to follow its own rhythm. It is this companionship between people and wildlife that makes the canals feel so welcoming. Boats pass without disturbing the birds, while the birds continue their daily routines as though the boats have always belonged there. Over many centuries, both have learned to share the waterways in comfortable harmony, creating an atmosphere that feels for everyone who visits. It serves as a mirror for the changing seasons, a home for wildlife, and a gathering place where nature accompanies everyday life. The ducks, swans, moorhens, and herons are not passing visitors. They have become part of the living character of Giethoorn, reminding everyone that the village's greatest treasure is not found in any single cottage or bridge, but in the balance between the waterways, the people, and the natural world that surrounds them. Giethoorn is not only a village surrounded by water, it also sits within a rich wetland ecosystem that has supported an extraordinary variety of plants and animals for centuries. The marshes, reed beds, ponds, and shallow lakes surrounding the village form a living environment where countless species have found shelter. While people admire the charming cottages and graceful bridges, nature continues its own daily routines, only a short distance away. Wetlands are among the most productive habitats in the natural world. Although they may appear unchanging, they are constantly supporting life above and below the water's surface. Fish move through submerged plants, insects emerge from the shallows, birds search for nesting places among the reeds, and countless tiny organisms help keep the entire system in balance. Everything depends upon everything else, creating a landscape where even the smallest creatures play an important role. The extensive reed beds surrounding Giethoorn are a perfect example of this balance. From a distance, they may look like simple patches of tall grass swaying in the breeze, yet they provide food, shelter, and protection for an astonishing number of animals. Birds weave nests among the sturdy stems, small mammals disappear beneath the thick vegetation, and countless insects spend their lives hidden within this sheltered world. The reeds also help filter the water, improving the health of the canals and lakes connected to the village. The reed beds function in much the same way. Birds may occupy the upper stems, while insects cling to the leaves. Fish remain below in the shaded water, and frogs wait along the muddy edges. From the outside, it appears simple, yet inside the reeds, an entire community goes about its business every day. As daylight fades during the warmer months, another familiar sound begins filling the wetlands. Frogs announce the evening with calls that drift across the water, creating a natural chorus that has echoed through these marshes for countless generations. Their voices become part of the village atmosphere on calm summer evenings when sound carries easily across the canals. Children visiting Giethoorn often delight in trying to discover where the frogs are hiding. The sound may seem close one moment and surprisingly distant the next, yet the frogs themselves usually remain hidden among the reeds or beside the canal banks, relying upon their natural coloring to blend into the landscape. Their ability to remain unseen despite being so easily heard adds a sense of mystery to the wetlands. During sunny afternoons, another fascinating resident becomes impossible to ignore. Dragonflies dart gracefully above the canals, their transparent wings catching the light as they move with speed and precision. They appear weightless, changing direction in an instant before hovering motionless above the water. Dragonflies have existed on Earth for an astonishing length of time. Long before people built villages or harvested peat from these marshes, their ancient ancestors were already flying above wetlands. While generations of families have come and gone, while cottages have been built and bridges maintained, dragonflies have continued following the same rhythms that have served them for millions of years. The canals themselves also welcome another display during the warmer months. Their blossoms rise above the surface, opening to the sunlight before closing again as daylight fades. The wide leaves provide resting places for insects and shelter for fish beneath the water, making them more than flowers. Below you, water lilies rest upon the surface, while dragonflies hover just above them. A frog disappears beneath a leaf, and ripples spread outward as a duck glides past. Nothing competes for attention. Every movement feels unhurried, allowing the scene to unfold at its own comfortable pace. Every living creature appears to understand its place within the landscape. The birds occupy the skies and reeds. The frogs remain close to the water's edge. Dragonflies patrol the canals with effortless precision, while water lilies decorate the calmer stretches of water. Together they create a living picture that changes from hour to hour, while somehow always feeling familiar. Those simple observations often become the memories that stay with people the longest. A dragonfly resting for only a few seconds on a reed, the sound of frogs greeting the evening, a heron standing patiently in the distance while water lilies drift nearby. These moments are never arranged for visitors. They happen because the wetlands continue supporting life as they have for centuries. Looking across the marshes today, Giethoorn is more than a village built beside canals. The reed beds shelter countless species. The frogs fill warm evenings with their familiar voices. Dragonflies dance above the canals, and water lilies bloom throughout the summer. Together they remind us that some of the greatest treasures of Giethoorn are not only the things built by human hands, but also the natural world that has always flourished alongside them. One of the pleasures of visiting Giethoorn is discovering that the village never looks the same twice. Although its canals, bridges, and cottages remain familiar throughout the year, the changing seasons reshape the landscape in ways both subtle and remarkable. Every few months, nature rearranges the colors, the sounds, and even the pace of daily life. The tune remains unchanged, yet each performance carries its own character. In Giethoorn, the seasons become those musicians, each bringing a different mood, while allowing the timeless beauty of the village to remain at the heart of the experience. Spring arrives across the Dutch countryside. The long, darker days of winter begin to retreat as fresh green leaves appear on trees that only weeks before stood bare against the sky. The reed beds surrounding the village awaken with new growth. Gardens begin filling with color once again, and birds return to the canals with renewed energy. Instead, each morning seems to offer one small sign that nature is beginning another cycle. For the people of Giethoorn, spring has always been a season of renewal. Gardens that rested through the colder months once again become places of careful attention. Flower beds are prepared, shrubs begin producing fresh leaves, and the familiar colors of tulips, roses, and hydrangeas return to brighten the village. Birdsong also becomes one of spring's most familiar companions. Early in the morning, before many visitors begin exploring the village, the air fills with calls from birds hidden among trees, hedges, and reed beds. Unlike the sharp sound of traffic that marks the beginning of the day in many towns and cities, mornings in Giethoorn often begin with little more than birds, breezes, and the movement of water. Fresh air carries the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers, while birds welcome the new day from nearby branches. A boat rests beside the dock, its reflection clear upon the still water. The village awakens at its own pace, allowing the day to begin with calm. As spring gives way to summer, Giethoorn reaches one of its most colorful moments of the year. Trees become full with leaves, gardens overflow with flowers, and the canals seem hidden beneath the rich greenery surrounding them. The longer days invite residents and visitors alike to spend more time outdoors, whether enjoying boat rides, walking across the many wooden bridges, or sitting beside the water, watching the village drift through another warm afternoon. Unlike places where summer heat can become overwhelming, the Dutch climate remains relatively mild. Comfortable temperatures allow flowers to flourish while keeping the village pleasantly green throughout the season. Breezes move across the canals, carrying the soft rustle of leaves and reeds without disturbing the surface of the water for long. Even during the busiest weeks of summer, Giethoorn never seems to lose the charm that has defined it for centuries. The warm months also bring longer evenings that seem to linger well after the sun begins its slow descent. Golden light settles across the thatched roofs, turning the white cottages warm shades of cream and amber. Shadows stretch across the gardens, while reflections deepen within the canals. Then, without notice, summer begins yielding to autumn. The first hints appear high among the trees where green leaves adopt shades of yellow, orange, and deep red. Day by day, these colors spread throughout the village until the canals become bordered by warm autumn tones. Autumn encourages another kind of observation. The air becomes cooler, encouraging slower walks along the canal paths and quieter moments spent watching leaves drift onto the water. Boats continue gliding beneath the bridges, yet the atmosphere feels slightly different from summer. Few sights capture the beauty of Giethoorn more than an autumn afternoon when colorful trees are reflected in still canals. Looking down from one of the village's graceful wooden bridges, it can feel that two landscapes exist at once. Above the water stand cottages, gardens, and brilliant autumn foliage. Below the surface appears an identical world, moving with the slightest ripple before becoming still once again. Eventually, winter settles across the Netherlands, bringing another transformation. Trees stand bare once more, gardens rest beneath the colder weather, and mornings often begin beneath soft blankets of mist. Occasionally, snow dusts the reed roofs and wooden bridges, giving the village an appearance that feels magical. During particularly cold winters, something special can happen. The calm canals may freeze. For generations, frozen waterways have become part of winter life throughout the Netherlands. In Giethoorn, when conditions are just right, the canals can transform from waterways into smooth ribbons of ice stretching through the village. Where boats normally glide, people may instead enjoy skating across the frozen surface, continuing the long Dutch tradition of embracing winter instead of hiding from it. Children laugh as they skate between the cottages, neighbors greet one another on the ice, and the village once again adapts to the changing season. The route has remained the same, only the way of traveling has changed. Spring brings blossoms and birdsong. Summer fills the gardens with color. Autumn paints the trees with warm shades reflected in the canals. Winter occasionally transforms water into ice, inviting an entirely different way of experiencing the village. Through every season, the canals remain at the heart of daily life, reminding everyone that change does not diminish beauty. Instead, it reveals another side of a landscape that has spent centuries living in harmony with the natural rhythm of the year. The silence of Giethoorn is one of the first things visitors notice, yet it is also one of the easiest qualities to overlook. Silence is rarely complete. It is made up of many sounds working together. Water brushes against the sides of a boat. A breeze moves through nearby trees. Birds call from the reed beds, while distant church bells occasionally drift across the village. These sounds create an atmosphere that feels rather than empty. For generations, the people of Giethoorn have understood that preserving this calm environment is one of the village's greatest treasures, and today, one of the most important ways they protect that tranquility is through the boats that travel along the canals. For centuries, boats have been the natural choice for moving through the village. Early residents relied upon simple wooden craft that were pushed, rowed, or guided through the waterways by hand. They carried everything needed for daily life, from harvested peat and bundles of reeds to groceries, building materials, and neighbors paying one another a friendly visit. Journeys were measured by the steady movement of water instead of the speed of wheels, and that tradition of travel has remained part of Giethoorn's identity ever since. As tourism introduced more visitors to the village, local residents faced an interesting challenge. People wanted to experience Giethoorn from the water because the canals reveal the village from its most perspective. The solution reflected the same practical thinking that had shaped Giethoorn from the beginning. Instead of allowing louder boats to dominate the canals, the community embraced small electric boats that move with quietness. These boats became known as whisper boats, a name that captures their character. Their electric motors produce only the softest hum, allowing passengers to enjoy the surrounding scenery without the constant sound of an engine. As a whisper never overwhelms a conversation, these boats travel without disturbing the calm rhythm of the village. They leave only ripples spreading across the canals before the reflections settle once again. The boat appears silently, carrying families or curious visitors who speak in relaxed voices while admiring the cottages along the canal. A swan continues swimming without concern. Ducks remain comfortably near the water's edge. The only noticeable movement comes from the wake trailing behind the boat as it disappears around the next bend. Moments later, the canal seems just as it was before the journey began. This approach to transportation reflects something much deeper than modern technology. It demonstrates the village's long-standing respect for its surroundings. Every generation has made practical decisions that allowed Giethoorn to grow without losing the qualities that made it unique. The early settlers adjusted to marshland instead of forcing it to become dry farmland. Builders used reeds growing around them to roof their homes. Residents learned to travel by boat because the waterways offered the easiest route. Choosing electric boats continues that same tradition of working with the landscape instead of against it. For many visitors, hiring a whisper boat becomes the highlight of their time in Giethoorn. Setting out from a small dock, they quickly leave behind the busy pace of modern life and begin following the curves of the canals. Every turn reveals another tended garden, another graceful bridge, or another charming cottage reflected in the water. Details that would be missed from a speeding vehicle become impossible to overlook when traveling at such a relaxed pace. Some visitors prefer an even more traditional experience by exploring the canals in canoes or small paddle boats. These craft move entirely through human effort, creating no sound at all beyond the dipping of a paddle into the water. Traveling this way encourages people to notice every part of their surroundings. They become aware of dragonflies hovering above the reeds, birds resting beneath overhanging branches, and flowers leaning toward the canal from nearby gardens. There is an interesting similarity between exploring Giethoorn by boat and walking through an art gallery. In both places, moving too quickly means missing many of the finest details. A painting deserves more than a passing glance. just as the village deserves more than a hurried cruise through its canals. Before long, visitors often realize they are no longer thinking about reaching a destination. The journey itself has become the reward. Even residents who have traveled these waterways throughout their lives continue discovering small moments worth appreciating. Morning light reflects differently from evening light. Breezes create new patterns across the water. Gardens change with the seasons, and wildlife appears unexpectedly around familiar corners. The canals remain the same, yet every journey offers something slightly different. That variety is one reason Giethoorn never seems to lose its charm, even for those who know every bridge and every bend by heart. Today, the whisper boats represent more than a convenient way for visitors to explore. They are another chapter in the long relationship between the people of Giethoorn and the waterways that have shaped their lives for nearly 8 centuries. By choosing silence over noise and movement over speed, the village continues preserving the atmosphere that first drew admiration from travelers around the world. Although Giethoorn is often described as a village of canals, no two waterways are alike. Others widen until they open into lakes that seem to stretch the landscape far beyond the village itself. This variety gives every journey its own character. These narrow canals were never designed to impress visitors. They developed as the landscape changed through generations of peat harvesting and careful settlement. Because they followed the natural contours of the marshland, they often curve rather than running in straight lines. It also creates a pleasant sense of discovery. Around every bend waits another charming cottage, another tended garden, or another graceful bridge spanning the water. Traveling through these canals encourages a different way of observing the world. In many places, roads are built to help people reach their destination as quickly as possible. The canals of Giethoorn invite the opposite approach. They encourage people to notice small details that might otherwise pass unseen. The destination matters far less than the experience of getting there. Eventually, many of the narrower waterways flow into larger lakes surrounding the village. These open stretches of water create a wonderful contrast after the intimacy of the smaller canals. Instead of cottages standing only a short distance away, the view expands across broad wetlands where reeds sway in the breeze and distant trees line the horizon. The transition feels effortless, allowing travelers to experience both the cozy charm of the village and the open beauty of the Dutch countryside during the same outing. Both spaces are beautiful, yet each offers a different feeling. The canals and lakes of Giethoorn create a similar balance. Together they provide variety without ever disturbing the calm atmosphere that defines the village. Connecting these waterways are some of the most recognizable landmarks in Giethoorn, its graceful wooden bridges. From every direction, one bridge seems to lead toward another, creating an intricate network linking homes, gardens, and walking paths throughout the village. Their curved shapes have become one of the defining images of Giethoorn, appearing in countless photographs, paintings, and travel journals. Yet these structures were never designed to please the eye. Their elegant form grew directly from practical necessity. The bridges rise in an arch because boats needed enough space to pass comfortably beneath them. If the bridges had been built flat, taller boats carrying supplies or passengers would have struggled to continue along the canals. By lifting the center of each bridge, while keeping the approaches gradual, local builders created crossings that served both people walking above and boats traveling below. It is a simple solution that has remained effective for generations. Consider an old pocket watch that still keeps excellent time after more than a century. Its beauty comes not from unnecessary decoration, but from careful craftsmanship that allows every part to perform its purpose with precision. The bridges of Giethoorn possess that same quality. Their pleasing appearance grows from the work they were built to do. Form and function exist together so comfortably that it becomes difficult to imagine the village looking any other way. Many of these bridges were originally built by hand using traditional woodworking skills passed from one generation to the next. Local craftsmen understood the qualities of timber, knowing which pieces would provide strength, which would resist moisture, and how every beam should fit together to create a sturdy crossing capable of lasting for many years. Building a bridge required more than simple construction. Walking across one of these bridges today offers a wonderful opportunity to pause for a moment and appreciate the village from above. Looking in one direction, the canal stretches between rows of cottages and flowering gardens. Turning the other way reveals another waterway, disappearing beneath overhanging trees before bending out of sight. Beneath your feet, the wooden planks carry the footsteps of residents and visitors, just as they have done for countless years, while below the arch, a whisper boat may drift silently past on its unhurried journey. Because the bridges are scattered throughout the village, they also create a pleasant rhythm for anyone exploring on foot. A path leads to a bridge, the view opens across the canal, and then another winding path continues toward the next crossing. This repeating pattern gives every walk a flow, encouraging people to stop, look around, and appreciate each new perspective before moving onward. It is impossible to hurry through Giethoorn without feeling that something has been left unnoticed. The canals connect one place to another through water, while the bridges connect them across the land. Together, they create a community where movement feels effortless and where design has served everyday life for centuries. Their continued presence reminds us that the finest solutions are often the simplest, when they are shaped by generations of experience and a deep understanding of the landscape they are meant to serve. Although the historic heart of Giethoorn is famous for its canals, boats, and wooden bridges, the village does not exist entirely without roads. Beyond the oldest canal district, the landscape changes. Roads begin to appear, bicycles become a familiar sight, and the modern conveniences of everyday life blend comfortably with centuries of tradition. This transition is one of the reasons Giethoorn feels so authentic. The village has never tried to freeze itself in a single moment of history. Instead, it has allowed modern life to develop around its historic center while protecting the unique character that first made it so special. After hearing that Giethoorn is a village without roads, many imagine they will be unable to drive anywhere nearby. In reality, roads serve the newer sections of the community, just as they do throughout the rest of the Netherlands. Parking areas welcome arriving guests, local residents go about their daily routines, and businesses receive deliveries much as they would in any other village. The difference becomes apparent only as people approach the historic center. Little by little, the familiar sounds of traffic begin to fade. Footpaths replace streets, and the waterways become the primary routes through the oldest part of Giethoorn. This balance allows the village to enjoy the advantages of modern life while preserving the atmosphere that has drawn visitors for generations. The original character remains intact, yet daily life continues to function comfortably. Giethoorn has achieved that balance with success, allowing history and the present to exist side by side without either one overwhelming the other. Bicycles become an important part of life outside the Canal district. Across the Netherlands, cycling has long been one of the country's most familiar ways to travel, and Giethoorn is no exception. Well-maintained paths connect neighborhoods, nearby villages, and the surrounding countryside, making short journeys both practical and enjoyable. Much like the whisper boats, they encourage a slower pace that allows people to notice their surroundings. A cyclist has time to admire grazing cattle in a nearby meadow, pause beside a canal, or enjoy the changing colors of the fields as the seasons pass. The journey itself becomes part of the pleasure rather than the distance between two destinations. The narrow canal paths give way to wider cycling routes, bordered by open fields and farms. A light breeze carries the scent of fresh grass, while distant church towers rise above the trees. Every few minutes, another small bridge appears, crossing a stream before the path continues through the Dutch landscape. Walking also remains an important part of everyday life in Giethoorn. The network of footpaths connecting the bridges and canals encourages people to explore at a leisurely speed. Unlike busy city streets, where pedestrians often weave quickly through crowds, the paths here seem designed for observation. These brief moments of stillness become part of the experience rather than interruptions to it. The footpaths also create a pleasant sense of discovery. Around one bend waits a charming cottage tucked behind flowering shrubs. Around another stands a graceful wooden bridge leading toward a canal lined with trees. Because the village unfolds gradually, every short walk offers another inviting view. Even residents who have followed these same paths for many years often find themselves appreciating small details that change with the weather, the season, or the shifting light of the day. Scattered among these paths are welcoming shops, cafes, and small businesses serving both local residents and visitors from around the world. Their scale reflects the character of the village itself. Rather than towering buildings or busy shopping centers, Giethoorn offers places that feel personal and closely connected to the surrounding community. Visitors may stop for a warm drink beside the canal, browse handmade crafts, or enjoy traditional Dutch treats while watching whisper boats glide past the windows. These businesses play an important role in preserving the welcoming atmosphere of the village. Many are family-owned, continuing traditions that stretch back through several generations. Friendly conversations often unfold as the slow movement of the canals outside, reminding visitors that Giethoorn is not a destination to admire, but a living community where people continue to work, raise families, and share everyday life much as they have for centuries. Tourism has become one of the village's most important sources of income, bringing guests from every corner of the world to experience its unique beauty. Photographs shared by travelers have introduced millions of people to Giethoorn, inspiring many to see its canals with their own eyes. Yet despite its growing popularity, the village has worked to ensure that welcoming visitors never comes at the expense of preserving its identity. That careful balance reflects a lesson that has guided Giethoorn since its earliest days. Each generation has adapted to changing circumstances while respecting the qualities that made the village unique in the first place. Roads were added where they made sense, bicycles became part of everyday life, and tourism brought new opportunities, yet the historic Canal District continues to remain the heart of the community. By allowing progress to support tradition rather than replace it, Giethoorn has managed to remain both a thriving village and one of the most places in the Netherlands. Today, it is easy to appreciate how these different ways of traveling fit together. Cars bring visitors close to the village. Bicycles carry people through the surrounding countryside. Footpaths encourage slow exploration, and boats continue gliding through the canals as they have for generations. Each serves its own purpose, yet none disturbs the rhythm that defines Giethoorn. Together, they create a community where history and modern life move forward side by side, connected by the same spirit that has shaped the village for nearly 800 years. As word spread beyond the borders of the Netherlands, more and more people began discovering Giethoorn for themselves. Some arrived after seeing a photograph in a travel magazine. Others heard about the village from friends who returned home speaking enthusiastically about canals, charming cottages, and graceful wooden bridges. In recent years, countless travelers have first encountered Giethoorn through photographs shared online, where images of flower-lined waterways and still reflections have introduced the village to audiences around the world. Yet despite the many paths that lead people here, most visitors leave with similar memories. They remember the quiet, they remember the water, and they remember feeling that they had stepped into a place unlike anywhere they had visited before. The appeal of Giethoorn reaches far beyond those interested in history or architecture. Some travelers arrive because they are searching for somewhere after visiting Europe's larger cities. Families enjoy exploring the canals together. Photographers hope to capture the perfect reflection beneath a wooden bridge, and artists often find inspiration in the balance between nature and the preserved village. Although every visitor arrives with different expectations, Giethoorn has a way of offering each person something memorable. Photography has become one of the village's closest companions. Almost every bend in the canal seems to offer another composition waiting to be discovered. A thatched cottage framed by blooming flowers, a graceful bridge reflected in still water, or a whisper boat drifting beneath overhanging trees can all become photographs that travelers treasure long after returning home. Yet Giethoorn is not the kind of place that reveals all of its beauty through a camera lens alone. A photograph can preserve the appearance of a canal, but it cannot fully capture the breeze moving through the reeds or the sound of water touching the side of a passing boat. It cannot reproduce the distant birdsong drifting across the wetlands, or the feeling of standing on a wooden bridge while soft evening light settles across the village. Those moments belong to the experience itself. The camera records the view, while memory keeps everything else. Artists have long understood this difference. Painters, in particular, have been drawn to Giethoorn because the village offers something beyond buildings. It offers changing light. Morning brings cool reflections stretching across the canals. Midday fills the gardens with bright color, while evening softens every shadow into warm shades of gold and amber. The same cottage can appear entirely different from one hour to the next because the sunlight has shifted across the water. For someone holding a paintbrush, every visit becomes an opportunity to see familiar scenes in entirely new ways. As the hours pass, the colors change. No painter could capture every moment at once. Instead, each chooses a single instant to preserve, creating a personal interpretation of a village that never truly stands still. Because of its appearance, Giethoorn has also found its way onto television screens and into films produced both within the Netherlands and beyond. Directors searching for a setting that feels timeless often discover that little needs to be changed before filming begins. The canals, cottages, gardens, and bridges already create an atmosphere that seems untouched by modern life. Rather than constructing elaborate scenery, filmmakers frequently find that Giethoorn provides its own natural stage, one shaped patiently over many centuries instead of within a studio. Many places reveal small details that remind viewers they belong to the modern world. Busy roads, overhead wires, large buildings, or constant traffic can easily interrupt the feeling of stepping into another time. Giethoorn's historic centre avoids much of that visual distraction. The canals remain the focus, the cottages preserve their traditional character, and the landscape continues to reflect the same relationship between people and nature that first developed hundreds of years ago. At first, the comparison seems reasonable. Both places invite visitors to travel by water. Both feature graceful bridges crossing winding canals, and both have become internationally admired for their unique beauty. The comparison also helps introduce Giethoorn to people hearing its name for the first time, providing a familiar reference that makes its unusual character easier to picture. Yet the more time one spends in Giethoorn, the more its individual personality begins to emerge. Venice grew into one of Europe's great maritime cities, filled with grand architecture, magnificent palaces, and bustling waterways that connected an important center of trade with the wider world. Giethoorn tells a quieter story. It developed as a small village shaped by peat harvesting, wetlands, and generations of families learning to live comfortably beside the water. Both may be filled with music, yet each offers a different experience. One impresses through its scale and grandeur, while the other touches people through its warmth and simplicity. Giethoorn belongs firmly in the second category. Its beauty never asks for attention. Instead, it reveals itself to anyone willing to slow down and notice the countless details surrounding every canal and every bridge. By the end of their journey, Giethoorn no longer feels like another version of somewhere else. It has become memorable on its own terms. The waterways, flower-filled gardens, whisper boats, and rhythm of daily life create an identity unlike any other. Rather than borrowing its charm from comparisons, the village earns admiration through the authenticity it has preserved for nearly 8 centuries. Across the many artists, photographers, filmmakers, and travelers who have found inspiration here, one shared experience becomes clear. They may arrive carrying cameras, paintbrushes, or notebooks, yet they often leave carrying something far less tangible. They leave with the memory of a place where everyday life still unfolds at the pace of moving water, where beauty is found not through grand spectacle, but through harmony, and where one small Dutch village continues welcoming the world without ever losing the character that first made it extraordinary. Although Giethoorn is often introduced to newcomers as the Venice of the Netherlands, the comparison only tells part of the story. It helps people picture a village where canals replace many of the streets, Yet the feeling of the two places is quite different. Venice grew into one of the world's great trading cities, welcoming merchants, explorers, and travelers from distant lands for many centuries. Its canals are broad, its buildings are grand, and its history reflects the rise of an important maritime power. Giethoorn, by contrast, remained a rural village, shaped by marshland, farming, and the steady rhythm of everyday family life. Rather than impressing visitors through size or grandeur, it captures their attention through simplicity, tranquility, and its close relationship with the surrounding countryside. That quieter atmosphere becomes apparent immediately. In Venice, boats move constantly through busy waterways, lined with magnificent stone buildings. In Giethoorn, the canals wind between flower gardens, reed-thatched cottages, and grassy canal banks, where birds rest undisturbed. Neither place is more than the other. They tell different stories. One speaks of commerce and great cities. The other tells the story of a small community that adjusted to the landscape nature placed before it. The countryside surrounding Giethoorn helps creating that character. Leaving the historic canal district behind, visitors soon discover broad meadows stretching across the Dutch landscape. These open fields have supported farming families for generations, providing rich grazing land for dairy cattle that thrive in the cool, moist climate of the Netherlands. The transition from canals to farmland feels natural, reminding visitors that Giethoorn has always been connected to the agricultural traditions of the region as much as its famous waterways. On many days, cattle can be seen grazing beneath wide open skies, their black and white markings standing out against the brilliant green fields. Shallow drainage channels cross the meadows, helping manage water while creating neat patterns throughout the countryside. The scene feels unhurried. Farmers continue caring for their land, much as earlier generations did, while birds search the fields for insects and breezes ripple through the tall grasses. It is a landscape where farming and nature have comfortably shared the same space for centuries. Canals and wooden bridges of Giethoorn. Ahead stretches an open meadow, where cattle graze beneath drifting clouds. The only sounds are birds calling across the fields, leaves moving in the breeze, and the distant hum of village life carried across the countryside. It becomes easy to understand why so many visitors choose to explore beyond the canals. The surrounding farmland completes the story, showing that Giethoorn is not an isolated attraction, but part of a much larger landscape shaped by both nature and generations of careful stewardship. These dairy farms have also contributed to one of the Netherlands' best-known culinary traditions. Dutch cheeses have earned admiration around the world, and the rich milk produced by healthy grazing cattle has long provided the foundation for this craft. Although Giethoorn itself is not famous as a major cheese-producing centre, the surrounding region shares in the agricultural heritage that has made Dutch dairy products so highly respected. Farming families have spent generations refining their knowledge, producing cheeses that range from young and mild to richly aged varieties full of complex flavour. There is an interesting similarity between traditional cheese-making and many of the other crafts found throughout the Netherlands. Both depend upon patience, careful observation, and respect for methods passed from one generation to the next. A fine cheese cannot be hurried any more than a tended garden can bloom before its season arrives. Time performs much of the work, while skilled hands guide the process with experience gained over many years. It is another example of how Dutch traditions often value steady craftsmanship over unnecessary haste. The Dutch relationship with water extends far beyond the canals of Giethoorn. Across much of the country, generations of engineers, farmers, and builders have worked together to shape a landscape where land and water exist in careful balance. One of the most familiar symbols of that achievement is the traditional windmill. Although many people think of windmills as charming landmarks, they once served an essential purpose throughout the Netherlands by helping control water levels across low-lying land. Long before electric pumps became available, windmills harnessed the steady movement of the wind to power large mechanical systems capable of lifting water from one level to another. This allowed farmers to drain fields that might otherwise remain flooded and helped communities manage water more effectively throughout the changing seasons. Without these ingenious machines, much of the surrounding countryside would have been far more difficult to farm or settle successfully. Growing healthy crops would become nearly impossible without some reliable way of guiding that excess water elsewhere. The Dutch faced this challenge across vast areas of their country, and the windmill became one of the most elegant solutions ever developed. Rather than fighting against nature, it worked with two of the Netherlands' greatest natural resources, the wind above and the water below. Although modern technology has largely replaced the original working role of many windmills, they continue standing as proud reminders of Dutch ingenuity. Their graceful sails turning against the sky have become enduring symbols of a nation that learned to live alongside water with creativity. Visitors traveling through the countryside around Giethoorn occasionally catch sight of these historic structures rising above the fields, connecting the village with the wider story of the Netherlands. Looking across the meadows surrounding Giethoorn, the village is only one chapter in a much larger landscape. The tranquil canals, the grazing cattle, the traditions of dairy farming, and the historic windmills all belong to the same story. Together they reveal a country that has spent centuries working with its environment instead of trying to conquer it. That partnership between people and nature has shaped not only Giethoorn itself, but also the countryside that continues surrounding the village today, creating a setting where history, agriculture, and beauty remain connected. The appearance of Giethoorn often leads visitors to believe that the surrounding landscape has always existed as they see it today. Yet beneath that surface lies one of the greatest engineering achievements in human history. Much of the Netherlands has been shaped through centuries of planning, patient labor, and an extraordinary understanding of water. The people who settled this region quickly learned that living beside water meant more than enjoying its beauty. It required respecting its power, understanding its behavior, and working together to keep it in balance. Unlike many countries where rivers drain toward the sea without much human assistance, the Netherlands has always faced a unique challenge. Large areas of the country lie at or even below sea level, meaning that without careful management, water would reclaim much of the land. Heavy rainfall, rising rivers, and tides from the nearby North Sea all influence the landscape throughout the year. Rather than abandoning these low-lying regions, generations of Dutch engineers and local communities developed creative ways to live safely alongside the water. One of their most important solutions was the construction of dikes. A dike may appear to be a long earthen embankment following the edge of a river or coastline. In reality, these structures represent centuries of knowledge and careful design. Built to hold back water while protecting homes, farmland, and entire communities, dikes became essential to the development of the Netherlands. Without them, many of the landscapes admired today would look entirely different. Inside the ring, the water can be controlled, while everything outside continues following its natural movement. A dike works on a much larger scale. It creates a protected boundary, allowing people to safely live and farm in places that might otherwise remain underwater. Although the idea sounds simple, building and maintaining these protective barriers has required dedication across many generations. The people living near Giethoorn understood that water could never be ignored. Every season brought changing conditions. Spring rains increased the flow of rivers. Autumn storms sometimes raised water levels, and long periods of wet weather tested the strength of drainage systems. Rather than viewing these changes as constant threats, Dutch communities learned to observe them. Closely connected to the dikes are another fascinating feature of Dutch engineering known as polders. A polder is an area of land where the water level is managed by people, then left entirely to nature. These areas may have once been marshes, shallow lakes, or low-lying wetlands before being transformed into productive farmland or places where communities could safely grow. Creating a polder demanded patience, planning, and cooperation because every stage depended upon careful control of the surrounding water. Creating a polder follows a similar philosophy. Progress comes through countless decisions than one dramatic moment. Over time, careful effort reshapes the landscape while still respecting the natural forces surrounding it. Creating protected land is only part of the challenge. Water must also continue moving away from those lower areas whenever rain falls or rivers rise. For centuries, this responsibility belonged to pumps powered first by windmills and later by increasingly modern technology. It was a practical partnership between engineering and nature. Instead of trying to eliminate water altogether, the Dutch guided it where it could do the least harm. Today, modern pumping stations continue much of that work behind the scenes. Visitors exploring Giethoorn often admire the canals without realizing how much planning helps maintain the surrounding landscape. Water levels are monitored, drainage systems are maintained, and engineers continue building upon knowledge first developed many centuries ago. The thing is that when these systems function well, they disappear from notice. The village feels natural, allowing the beauty of the landscape to remain the center of attention. This success reflects one of the defining qualities of Dutch engineering. The greatest achievements are often those that visitors hardly notice at all. A canal remains calm because its water level is managed. Meadows stay green without becoming flooded. Homes remain dry through changing seasons because generations have continued maintaining the systems protecting them. Like the foundations beneath a house, much of the most important work remains hidden while supporting everything above it. Most listeners focus on the melody, never thinking about the conductor guiding the performance from the front of the stage. Dutch water management serves a similar role. It allows everyday life to unfold because countless unseen systems continue working together with precision. Their success is measured not by drawing attention to themselves, but by allowing the landscape to flourish. For the people of Giethoorn, this careful relationship with water has always shaped daily life. The canals bringing beauty to the village also remind residents of the importance of stewardship. Every generation has inherited both the benefits and the responsibilities of living in such an environment. Looking across the village and its surrounding countryside, Giethoorn represents more than a collection of picturesque canals. It stands as part of a much larger story about human ingenuity, cooperation, and respect for nature. The dikes protecting the land, the polders reclaimed from water, and the pumps performing their work all demonstrate that lasting success often comes through patience and careful planning than dramatic change. Together, they have allowed one of Europe's most villages to thrive, proving that when people learn to work with the natural world instead of against it, extraordinary places can endure for centuries. Long before visitors arrived carrying cameras and travel guides, the canals of Giethoorn served a far more practical purpose. They were the village's roads, marketplaces, and lifelines, carrying the people and supplies that allowed the community to flourish. Every journey across the water had a reason. Families traveled to visit neighbors, farmers transported goods, craftsmen delivered their work, and fishermen set out before sunrise, hoping to return with the day's catch. The canals were never built to create scenery. Their beauty emerged from generations of ordinary people relying upon them every single day. Fishing became an important part of life throughout the wetlands surrounding Giethoorn. The canals, ponds, and nearby lakes provided a dependable source of fresh food for local families during periods when preserving every available resource was essential. Unlike modern supermarkets, where food arrives from many countries, earlier generations depended heavily upon what the surrounding landscape could provide. The waterways offered fish in abundance, rewarding those who understood their rhythms and seasonal patterns. Among the most valuable catches were freshwater eels. For centuries, eels have helped Dutch cuisine, prized for their rich flavor and ability to thrive within the slow-moving waterways of the region. Catching them required patience than speed. Fishermen learned where the eels preferred to hide, how changing weather influenced their movements, and which seasons offered the greatest success. Knowledge like this could not be mastered in a single afternoon. It was gained through years of observation and passed from one generation to the next. The village still rests beneath the fading stars, while a fisherman unties his small wooden boat from the dock. Every sound feels magnified in the still morning air. A distant bird calls from the reeds, the paddle slips into the water, and the day begins with the same rhythm that has welcomed countless mornings throughout the centuries. Fishing was only one reason boats traveled through the canals each day. Nearly everything needed for village life moved across the water at one time or another. Building timber, bundles of harvested reeds, sacks of grain, baskets of vegetables, household supplies, and even furniture found their way through the waterways. Before modern roads reached the area, boats provided the simplest and often the most reliable method of transporting heavy loads from one home to another. Rather than reversing into a driveway, the boat ties alongside a small dock where neighbors lend a helping hand to unload the cargo. The entire process feels calmer, more personal, and suited to the landscape surrounding it. For the people of Giethoorn, scenes like this were once part of everyday life. Because boats played such an important role, learning to handle them became a valuable skill from an early age. Children growing up in Giethoorn became familiar with the waterways that surrounded their homes. Just as young people elsewhere learned to ride bicycles or safely cross busy streets, children here learned how to move confidently upon the canals. These lessons were about more than transportation. They encouraged patience, careful observation, and confidence. Those early experiences often remained with people throughout their lives, becoming part of the rhythm that defined the village. Before small electric motors became common, many boats were guided with long wooden poles as well as oars. In the shallower canals, these poles proved effective. A boatman would place the end of the pole firmly against the canal bed before pushing the boat forward with steady pressure. Once the boat gained momentum, the pole was lifted smoothly from the water and placed ahead once again. The movement was graceful, effortless to watch, though it required balance and experience to perform well. Watching an experienced boatman use one of these poles can seem like watching a practiced dance. Every movement flows into the next. The pole enters the water without a splash, the boat glides ahead, and the rhythm repeats with calm confidence. The movements appear simple, yet behind that simplicity lies years of practice. Every stroke is measured, every adjustment invisible, and every decision guided by experience than force. The people of Giethoorn developed that same understanding of their waterways because the canals formed such an important part of everyday life. Across the centuries, the boats of Giethoorn carried much more than people and supplies. They carried traditions, practical knowledge, and a way of life closely connected to the water itself. Fishermen setting out before dawn, families transporting everyday goods, children learning to row, and skilled boatmen guiding their craft with long wooden poles, all contributed to the character of a village that learned to thrive by embracing its unique landscape. Every journey along the canals added another chapter to the story of Giethoorn, reminding us that the most enduring traditions are often built not through extraordinary events, but through countless ordinary days lived in harmony with the world around us. As daylight gives way to evening, the canals of Giethoorn take on an entirely different character. The bright colors of gardens and cottages begin to soften beneath the fading light, while the water reflects the changing sky in deeper shades of blue and gold. It is during these hours that one begins to understand why so many people describe Giethoorn as a place where time itself seems to move differently. For centuries, the steady rhythm of rowing shaped countless evenings throughout the village. Before electric motors became available, the sound most often heard upon the canals was the dipping of wooden oars into the water. Each stroke created a soft splash, followed by the smooth glide of the boat as it continued forward. There was no sudden acceleration and no harsh mechanical noise. Watching an experienced rower move through the canals can be surprisingly relaxing. Every movement seems measured, requiring neither great strength nor hurried effort. The repetition itself creates a comforting sense of calm, reminding us that steady progress often feels more satisfying rather than constant activity speed. A small wooden boat approaches from beneath the shade of overhanging trees. The rower moves the oars with an easy confidence developed through many years of practice. Long after the boat has disappeared around the next bend, the water returns to perfect stillness, leaving no sign that anyone had passed only moments before. As darkness settled across Giethoorn in earlier centuries, another light appeared throughout the village. Before electric streetlights illuminated the canals, lanterns provided a warm and welcoming glow during the evening hours. Their soft light reflected upon the water, creating shimmering patterns that danced with every small movement of the canals. Instead of brightly flooding the landscape, the lanterns illuminated only the areas immediately around them, allowing much of the village to remain wrapped in darkness beneath the night sky. Unlike the bright white light of many modern lamps, a lantern produces a softer glow that seems suited to evenings. Small points of golden light rest beside cottages and docks, while their reflections stretch across the water below. It is a scene that feels timeless, one that generations of villagers would have recognized immediately. The canals themselves become quieter after sunset, allowing even the smallest sounds to carry across the water. A breeze moving through the reeds, the distant call of a night bird, or the creak of a wooden dock all become part of the evening atmosphere. Nothing competes for attention. Morning brings another transformation that has fascinated residents and visitors alike for generations. As the first light begins reaching across the wetlands, delicate mist often rises above the marshes surrounding Giethoorn. The warmer air meeting the cooler water creates thin layers of drifting vapor that move across the canals before disappearing beneath the morning sun. For a little while, cottages, bridges, and trees appear softened behind this veil, giving the entire village a dreamlike appearance. Few natural sights feel as morning mist drifting above still water. The outlines of distant cottages appear only as the mist begins to lift. A whisper boat remains tied beside a dock, waiting for the day ahead, while birds greet the morning from hidden branches along the canal. The world seems to awaken slowly, allowing every detail to emerge with patience than all at once. Throughout all these changing hours, one familiar sound has accompanied village life for centuries. From somewhere beyond the canals and cottages, church bells occasionally drift across the landscape, carried by the breeze. Their sound does not dominate the village. Instead, it becomes another layer within the atmosphere, marking the passing of time, much as it has for generations of families living beside these waterways. Church bells have long served as companions in many European villages. They have welcomed mornings, marked important celebrations, and gathered communities together during moments of both joy and reflection. In Giethoorn, their voices travel easily across the open water, reaching cottages, gardens, and distant meadows with clarity. Even visitors who cannot see the church often pause for a moment when the bells begin to ring, allowing the sound to become part of their memory of the village. Across a single day in Giethoorn, from the first morning mist rising above the marshes to the warm glow of lanterns reflected upon the evening canals, the village offers more than scenery. Every hour brings its own rhythm, shaped by water, light, and traditions that have continued through the centuries. The steady movement of oars, the reflections of lanterns, the drifting mist, and the distant church bells all remind us that Giethoorn has never depended upon grand spectacles to leave a lasting impression. Instead, it has always found its greatest beauty in the moments that so often pass unnoticed elsewhere, allowing every day to unfold with the same calm grace that has defined the village for nearly 800 years. One of the qualities people often remember most fondly after visiting Giethoorn has little to do with its canals or cottages. Instead, they remember the warmth of the people they met along the way. Dutch hospitality is often then extravagant. It does not rely upon grand gestures or elaborate ceremonies. Instead, it reveals itself through friendly conversations, a welcoming smile, helpful directions offered to strangers, and the genuine pride local residents take in sharing the place they call home. In a village like Giethoorn, where life has long unfolded at a gentler pace, those simple moments of kindness become just as memorable as the scenery itself. Hospitality has always been an important part of village life. For generations, neighbors depended upon one another during harvests, repairs, changing seasons, and the many ordinary tasks that filled each year. Living beside water encouraged cooperation because the canals connected everyone together in ways that roads often do elsewhere. A neighbor needing assistance was never far away, and helping one another became a natural part of everyday life. Although modern life has changed many routines, that welcoming spirit continues to shape the atmosphere of Giethoorn today. Visitors are not treated as interruptions to village life, but as guests invited to appreciate the same surroundings local families have enjoyed for centuries. This relaxed hospitality is perhaps best experienced beside one of the village's canal cafes. Scattered throughout Giethoorn are inviting places where outdoor tables overlook the waterways, allowing guests to pause for a while then passing through. Instead, people often settle comfortably into their chairs while watching whisper boats glide beneath nearby bridges or listening to birds calling from the gardens lining the canals. The cafe becomes another place where the village encourages people to slow their pace and enjoy the simple pleasure of being present. Fresh flowers decorate the edge of the terrace, while the movement of the canal reflects the cottages standing opposite. A whisper boat drifts silently past, its passengers smiling as they admire the gardens, and moments later, another bridge frames the view beyond. A warm drink rests comfortably on the table, while the conversation around you remains soft enough that the birds can still be heard between voices. Instead, the afternoon seems content to unfold at its own comfortable rhythm. Many of these cafes serve traditional Dutch favorites, prepared with the same straightforward care that characterizes much of the village itself. Fresh breads, locally produced cheeses, homemade soups, pastries, and simple meals invite visitors to enjoy the flavors of the region while resting beside the canals. The food is satisfying without being complicated, reflecting a long tradition of making the most of high-quality local ingredients. Like so many other parts of Giethoorn, the experience feels welcoming than elaborate, allowing the surroundings to remain the center of attention. Throughout the year, the village also celebrates its history and traditions through local festivals that bring residents together while warmly welcoming visitors. These gatherings are not defined by overwhelming crowds or extravagant displays. Instead, they often celebrate the community itself, its heritage, its waterways, and the customs that have shaped daily life across many generations. Music, local crafts, traditional foods, and shared activities create opportunities for neighbors to reconnect while introducing guests to the character of the village beyond its famous scenery. The celebration becomes less about entertainment and more about belonging. Even visitors who have never been there before can often sense that feeling, recognizing they are witnessing traditions that continue because they still matter deeply to the people who keep them alive. For those wishing to understand Giethoorn beyond its appearance, the village's museums offer another rewarding experience. While the canals and cottages tell much of the story through simple observation, museums preserve the details that might otherwise fade with time. Inside, visitors discover photographs, household items, farming equipment, and preserved displays explaining how generations of families lived and worked in this unique landscape. Rather than presenting history as something distant, these collections reveal how ordinary people shaped the village through countless practical decisions made over many centuries. Among the most fascinating exhibits are the historic tools once used during peat harvesting and everyday village life. Wooden implements worn smooth through years of use, handcrafted equipment designed for working in wetlands, and tools built specifically for life beside the canals all provide reminders of the skill required to thrive in this environment. Looking at these objects, it becomes easy to picture the people who once relied upon them. Every worn handle reflects years of careful work, while every designed tool speaks of practical knowledge passed patiently from one generation to the next. A polished hammer or carved wooden paddle tells its own story without needing many words. It reminds us that places are rarely created through dramatic moments alone. Instead, they emerge through thousands of ordinary tasks repeated faithfully across many years. The villages we admire today were built one careful decision at a time, using simple tools held by hard-working hands that expected little recognition beyond seeing the work completed well. As visitors leave the museums and return once again to the canals, those lessons often remain with them. The bridges no longer appear as attractive crossings. The cottages become more than charming buildings. Even the canals themselves begin to tell a deeper story, because they are now understood as the result of generations of work than accidental beauty alone. Every feature of Giethoorn gains greater meaning when viewed through the lives of the people who patiently shaped it. Today, its greatest strength has never rested solely in its setting. It also lives within the people who have preserved its traditions, welcomed visitors with genuine kindness, celebrated their shared heritage, and protected the knowledge handed down through countless generations. The canal cafes, village festivals, museums, and historic tools all remind us that Giethoorn is more than a destination. It remains a living community where history continues to be cared for with pride, allowing each new visitor to experience not only the beauty of the village itself, but also the warmth of the people who continue calling it home. The character of Giethoorn has never been preserved by chance. Every generation has inherited the village from those who came before, and with that inheritance has come an important responsibility. The canals must remain clean, the bridges maintained, the gardens lovingly tended, and the wetlands protected, so that future generations may experience the same beauty that has welcomed people for centuries. As the number of visitors has steadily increased, the people of Giethoorn have become caretakers as well as proud residents, recognizing that preserving the village is just as important as sharing it with the world. One of the oldest traditions supporting that effort is the careful harvesting of reeds. The tall reed beds surrounding the village appear wild and untouched, yet they have long been managed with great care. Cutting reeds has never been about gathering roofing material. It also helps maintain healthy wetlands by encouraging fresh growth and preventing older vegetation from becoming overcrowded. This seasonal work has shaped the landscape for generations, allowing both wildlife and traditional craftsmanship to flourish together. Harvesting reeds requires experience and good timing. If they are gathered too early, the stems may not yet possess the strength needed for durable thatched roofs. If left too long, weather can reduce their quality. Experienced reed cutters learn to recognize the right moment, working patiently through the marshes while selecting only the strongest stems. The work is physical, often performed in cool conditions surrounded by shallow water, yet it continues because the knowledge has proved valuable across many centuries. The reason is not resistance to progress, but respect for quality. The same idea applies to reed cutting. Although many modern roofing materials are available, properly harvested reeds continue providing beauty, durability, and a direct connection to the landscape that has always surrounded Giethoorn. Preserving the wetlands also means protecting the variety of wildlife that depends upon them. Birds nest among the reeds, fish shelter beneath aquatic plants, insects complete important stages of their lives within the shallow water, and countless smaller creatures contribute to the delicate balance of the ecosystem. Healthy wetlands benefit every part of the village because the canals, gardens, and surrounding countryside are all connected. Looking after one part helps protect the whole. As Giethoorn became known around the world, local leaders faced an important question. How could they welcome increasing numbers of visitors without allowing tourism to overwhelm the atmosphere that had made the village famous in the first place? It was a challenge requiring careful thought. More visitors brought valuable support to local businesses, yet preserving tranquility remained equally important. Rather than choosing one goal over the other, the village developed an approach that respected both. This balance is often described as sustainable tourism. The idea is straightforward. Visitors are encouraged to enjoy the village while also helping preserve it for those who will come after them. Boats are preferred over noisy engines. Walking and cycling are encouraged whenever possible. Historic buildings are maintained then replaced, and the surrounding natural environment continues receiving the attention it deserves. You would handle it with care, not because anyone demanded it, but because you understood its value. Visiting Giethoorn carries a similar sense of responsibility. Guests quickly realize they are experiencing a place that has survived through centuries of stewardship. Treating it with respect becomes the most natural response. The whisper boats introduced in recent decades reflect that philosophy. Their electric motors allow visitors to experience the canals without replacing birdsong and conversation with mechanical noise. Every silent journey helps preserve the atmosphere that makes the village feel so distinctive. The boats demonstrate that modern technology and historic preservation do not need to compete with one another. Instead, they can work together, allowing people to enjoy contemporary convenience while protecting centuries of tradition. Residents also understand that preserving Giethoorn means protecting everyday life, not maintaining attractive scenery. The village is more than an open-air museum. Children still grow up here, neighbors still greet one another across the canals, gardens continue blooming each spring, and families continue caring for homes that have stood beside the waterways for generations. Conservation is not about freezing time. It is about allowing life to continue while respecting the character that makes the community unique. Progress does not always require replacing the past. Sometimes it asks us to become caretakers of what already works. The canals still guide boats as they have for centuries. Reed roofs continue sheltering cottages beneath changing skies. Wildlife still thrives among the wetlands, and visitors still arrive seeking a corner of the world where everyday life unfolds at a gentler pace. Today, its greatest achievement is not merely surviving for nearly 8 centuries. Its true success lies in remaining faithful to the qualities that first shaped the village while adapting to each new generation. The reed beds continue providing materials for traditional roofs, conservation protects the surrounding wetlands, sustainable tourism encourages respectful exploration, and whisper boats preserve the rhythm of the canals. Together, these efforts ensure that Giethoorn remains not a place remembered from the past, but a living village whose spirit continues flowing forward, as steadily and as the waterways that have always been its heart. For many people, the greatest surprise about Giethoorn is not its canals, its bridges, or even its cottages. It is the feeling that time somehow moves differently there. Clocks continue marking every passing minute, just as they do everywhere else, yet the village seems untouched by the constant sense of urgency that often shapes modern life. There are few places where walking across a bridge or watching a boat drift along a canal feels like a meaningful part of the day than something happening on the way to somewhere else. Giethoorn reminds its visitors that there is value in slowing down, in paying attention, and in allowing ordinary moments to unfold without feeling the need to hurry them along. Daily life in the village follows a rhythm that has developed over many centuries. Mornings begin as residents open their homes to the fresh air, tend their gardens, or prepare for another day beside the canals. Boats leave their private docks without haste. Neighbors greet one another across the waterways, and birds continue their familiar routines among the reeds. Instead, life continues at the comfortable pace that has always suited this community. A boat gliding through calm water moves more than a vehicle traveling along a busy road. Every journey encourages patience. Before long, many visitors discover that they are no longer checking the time as often. You would understand the general story, yet you would miss the conversations, the moments, and the details that give the journey its meaning. Giethoorn encourages the opposite approach. It asks nothing more than a willingness to slow down and allow each bridge, garden, cottage, and waterway to reveal itself. The reward is not found in reaching the end of the journey, but in appreciating everything encountered along the way. Conversations become more relaxed. Walks last longer than originally planned because another bridge or another view invites one more pause. Even simple activities, such as sitting beside the canal with a warm drink, begin to feel unexpectedly satisfying. The village replaces the habit of rushing with the pleasure of observing, proving that surroundings can influence the way people experience time itself. Reflections shift imperceptibly as clouds drift overhead, while reeds move with each passing breeze. Nothing happens suddenly. Every change unfolds enough that the eye can comfortably follow it, creating an atmosphere where calm seems to become part of the landscape itself. It would float with the current, passing beneath a wooden bridge before continuing alongside gardens reflected in the water. There would be no urgency in its journey. The canal would carry it onward at its own natural pace, just as it has carried boats, people, and moments through the village for hundreds of years. Watching something so simple reminds us that movement does not always need to be fast to be meaningful. Even the smallest ripples tell part of the village's story. A duck lands upon the canal, creating another delicate pattern that disappears. A light breeze brushes across the surface, changing the reflections for only a few moments before everything settles once more. These movements become hypnotic, encouraging visitors to remain present instead of thinking constantly about what comes next. For generations, the people of Giethoorn have lived alongside these rhythms without needing to give them much thought. The canals have always been there, the bridges have always connected neighbors, and the changing seasons have continued arriving one after another with reassuring familiarity. Rather, instead of trying to control every moment, its residents have learned to move comfortably alongside the natural pace of the world around them. As visitors prepare to leave, many notice that something subtle has changed within themselves. The habits encouraged by the village often linger a little while longer. Conversations remain calmer during the journey home. Everyday surroundings seem a little quieter than before, and simple moments become easier to appreciate. Although the visit may last only a day or two, the memory of Giethoorn's rhythm often remains long afterward, reminding people that there is another way to experience the passing of time. Looking across the canals one final time, with ripples spreading beneath the bridges and reflections stretching toward the cottages, Giethoorn offers something increasingly rare. It offers permission to slow down without feeling that anything has been lost. The village asks for no great effort, only the willingness to notice the beauty already present in ordinary moments. That lesson may be the most valuable gift Giethoorn shares with everyone who visits, proving that some of life's richest experiences are found not by moving faster, but by allowing ourselves to move with the steady rhythm of the world around us. The final moments of any journey often invite us to look back and notice details that seemed ordinary when we first encountered them. After spending time wandering beside the canals of Giethoorn, those details begin to take on new meaning. The graceful bridges are no longer attractive crossings. The reed-thatched cottages become reminders of generations who learned to build with the landscape instead of against it. The quiet waterways reveal themselves as the heart of the village, carrying not only boats, but also centuries of history. What first appeared to be a beautiful destination gradually becomes something much richer, a living community where every canal, every garden, and every path tells part of a story that has been unfolding for nearly 800 years. Looking across the village one final time, it is impossible not to notice how the gardens seem to embrace the canals. Flowers lean toward the water, shrubs soften the edges of the pathways, and climbing roses find their way along fences and cottage walls with quiet confidence. Nothing appears arranged for visitors alone. Instead, the gardens feel like extensions of the homes themselves, tended patiently through changing seasons by people who have long understood that beauty often grows through steady care than hurried effort. Every blossom reflected upon the still water celebrates another year in the life of the village. The canals mirror these gardens with remarkable clarity, doubling the colors and allowing the landscape to exist both above and below the surface. A gentle breeze may briefly disturb the reflections before calm water restores them once again. Watching this simple pattern repeat itself reminds us that nature rarely remains still, yet it always seems to find its balance again. The village has followed that same quiet rhythm throughout its long history, adapting to changing times, while preserving the peaceful character that first made it so remarkable. High above the canals, birds continue their familiar journeys, from tree to tree and from reed bed to open water. Swans glide with effortless grace beneath the bridges, while ducks paddle comfortably along the canal banks. Herons stand patiently in the shallows, and smaller birds fill the gardens with gentle song as another day slowly draws toward its close. None of them seem concerned that people have traveled from distant countries to admire the place they call home. They continue their routines as they always have, reminding every visitor that Giethoorn belongs just as much to the natural world as it does to the people who have lived here for generations. The last warm light of the day reaches the tops of the trees before slowly drifting downward across the reed roofs and white cottages. The water changes from bright blue to soft shades of gold, then amber, before gradually reflecting the deeper colors of the approaching evening sky. A whisper boat passes beneath the bridge, leaving only gentle ripples that slowly fade into stillness. For a few peaceful moments, it feels as though the entire village has paused to enjoy the closing of another beautiful day. So much of the modern world seems to change with remarkable speed. New buildings rise where old ones once stood. Roads become busier, technology advances, and daily life often feels increasingly hurried. Yet Giethoorn has demonstrated that progress does not always require leaving the past behind. Sometimes the greatest wisdom lies in preserving the qualities that have served a community well for generations, while thoughtfully welcoming the future with care and respect. That lesson can be found everywhere throughout the village. The canals, first created through peat harvesting, continue carrying boats as they have for centuries. The wooden bridges still connect neighbors across the waterways. Reed roofs continue sheltering cottages built with traditional craftsmanship, while gardens bloom beside the canals each spring, just as they always have. Even the quiet electric whisper boats reflect the same thoughtful philosophy, embracing modern technology while protecting the peaceful atmosphere that makes Giethoorn unlike anywhere else in the world. They have witnessed a community that has learned to live alongside nature instead of constantly trying to reshape it. Water has never been viewed as an obstacle to overcome, but as a trusted companion guiding daily life. The surrounding wetlands have provided food, building materials, wildlife, and quiet beauty. Every generation has accepted the responsibility of caring for these gifts so they may continue enriching the lives of those who follow. The flowers may be different varieties, a few cottages may have been restored, and another generation of children may be learning to guide boats through the canals. Yet the feeling would certainly remain familiar. The bridges would still arch gracefully across the water. Birds would still greet the morning from the reeds. Gentle reflections would still shimmer beneath the cottages, and the peaceful rhythm of village life would continue flowing as the canals themselves. That quiet continuity is perhaps the greatest treasure Giethoorn possesses, offering reassurance that some places can remain true to themselves despite the passing of time. As our visit comes to an end, we leave behind more than picturesque views and memorable photographs. We leave with a deeper appreciation for the remarkable partnership between people and nature that has shaped this village since the year 1230. We have followed the story from marshland to thriving community, from peat diggers to whisper boats, from practical necessity to timeless beauty. Along the way, we have discovered that Giethoorn's greatest achievement is not surviving across the centuries, but doing so with patience, humility, and quiet grace. Thank you for listening to the Sleepy Mind channel. I hope you enjoyed learning about Giethoorn, the village without roads.